Thanks, David. Good morning. Good to see you. This is where we are. We're at values and principles, and later we'll be doing these other bits to bring you up to speed with urban design. Why are the places we're building so different from the places we like? Well, no one actually designed this, but it happens because people are trying to do their job. Someone designed this, but probably not for that particular site. This is the buy one get one free school of architecture. It's a shopping street, I suppose. It could be anywhere, and it's everywhere. But this is politics, so the ODPM and the DCLG need a slogan. So I think a committee at the ODPM thought, what are the three words that communicate least about the built environment? And, well, communities have to be in there. It doesn't really mean anything. Sustainable, of course, it means everything, and therefore nothing. And that word that we used to associate with pizzas, delivering, giving us the slogan, delivering sustainable communities, that we can chant at the end, which is at least better than some of the other slogans that the ODPM considered and rejected, like communing with sustainable deliverables, and a whole range of other ones that they didn't even tell us about. We know what doesn't work. We've learned from our mistakes, so we make new mistakes. And we're used to seeing new development in pods. We have the hospital, the business park, the housing estate, the school, and they tend to be on little pods off a main road. And what this diagram is trying to show is that if you have that form of development, you get quite long journeys between, if you're going from here to here, you've got to go quite a tortuous route. And the journeys tend to build up on certain roads, making certain roads busy and probably too busy for anyone actually to live on. Whereas if you take exactly the same amount of development and put it distribute it in a different way, and you mix it, you can have the same journeys. These are the same journeys as in the previous slide, but actually they're shorter journeys, and they don't build up all on the same roads that are therefore not very pleasant to walk along or live by. So some fairly simple things about the way we lay out places can have a big impact on the experience of moving around them. And it can have an impact on actually how healthy we are. But these statistics don't come up in the highway statistics. That the fact that we tend not to use our streets, that kids don't tend to walk around, and that we also know that whatever we're building, whatever we're designing or planning, has an impact on the use of resources. And actually, CABE's research says that nowadays everyone's signed up to this. Ask the average Londoner about it, and they will say, really, I think we need compact cities so that we can preserve the countryside, limit the use of resources, and that's how people should live. Although personally, I would like to live in a detached house in the suburbs. So there's a sort of mismatch between how individually we might choose to live and how we think cities actually should develop in the future. But anyway, we've got other things on our minds maybe as well. What's wrong with a bit of global warming? Well, here's the awful warning. A nice bit of sunshine, but there you go. Where do we need urban design? Well, obviously, we're used to thinking, we need good design in historic places, in great places, in landmark buildings. But actually, we need good design everywhere. and the challenge is to try and see in our everyday jobs where we can make things happen a bit better. Because every day, thousands of tiny decisions are being made that have an impact on the design. 84%, a nice statistic. I'm very fond of statistics, and here's one I made up earlier, which doesn't mean it's not true. 84% of all planning applications are conceived, drawn up by someone with no design training whatsoever. And this is how it's done, at the click of a mouse. This is a piece of software I borrowed from a volume house builder. Let's see if it works. You start with your greenfield site, and you get your technician to take one of your standard house types, and it just sort of designs itself. And there you've got, well, it's a place. It doesn't have a great sense of identity compared, say, to the traditional English market town that's developed over the centuries. Not that this is such a place. This is Dorchester, Poundbury on the edge of Dorchester, the Prince of Wales's model development, and there's Charles and Camilla having a little quality time to themselves. But to create a street like this that feels a bit like just a traditional street in a town took an immense effort, because to actually negotiate on planning practice and highway engineering regulations, because actually the default method of creating a street is more like this. And we think, how can you, it's just a road serving a bit of housing, but how can you possibly make a place that has a sense of identity and a sense of being somewhere when so much of it is taken up by highways? But as the highway engineers will say, yeah, but you've got to think about, what happens if the water main bursts? You've got to fix that on a day when one of the houses catches fire. And which is also actually the day when the bins are being emptied. And there's just room for a single car to sneak by on the right-hand side of the road, totally vindicating the highway engineering. It's not that we don't know about how to make successful places. This is the new town in Edinburgh. But so many things that just happen every day that tend to erode the quality. Here's an image from my forthcoming history of the pedestrian guardrail. This is High Street, Kensington. 2 years ago, they're trying hard to make it a pleasant shopping environment. They're competing with a lot of other places where people go to shop. So there's hanging baskets here. But 2 years ago, the cabinet member responsible for the environment said, can't we get rid of some of this clutter in the street? This isn't really a very pleasant shopping environment. And his officers said, well, actually, there's reasons. There's the guard railing is there because we've got to try and keep the streets safe, and there's regulations. But when he looked at the regulations, it didn't say you have to have guardrails all along the street. And eventually, they managed to sweep a lot of them away by the cabinet member taking the initiative and saying, if there are any injuries and there's complaints that we've been irresponsible, I'll stand up in court and take the rap. And he was happy to do that, not because he was being willful or rash, but because he knew they'd looked at every bit of the street in redesigning it to decide what would actually make a safe street. And here it is 2 years later. And this is a dangerous street because these people, well, there's a man walking across the street, not at a designated crossing place, and he could be run over. These couple here could wander onto the street any moment and get mown down. But probably they won't, because they can see the potential danger, and because the traffic can see that it's not a motorway, it's actually a shopping street where people can cross at any point. People have a natural instinct for being safe. But if we put too much safety hardware there, we can just serve to sometimes disable it. And if we can't make streets that work and the people feel attracted to because it's a pleasant environment to wander around, then we say, well, actually, let's go to a blue water shopping centre and have somewhere that's tailor-made for consuming. But it doesn't have that exchange, that mix of activities that a traditional place does. And although blue water itself might be beautifully designed and successful, it's sort of turning its back on the rest of the public realm that we're sort of giving up with and saying, well, we'll have a few places that work really well, and the rest of the place, well, we'll just drive through them on our way. Principles of urban design is what we're talking about, and we've arrived at them fairly painfully. As Groucho Marx said, these are my principles. If you don't like them, I have others. And for years, the argument in planning was between architects and planners, and the architects tend to say, look, design is about aesthetics. It's something that planners don't understand. It's about rhythm, harmony, balance, and stuff that some people understood and others don't. And the government said, fair enough. And the planning system isn't about aesthetics. It's nice if you get beautiful places, but the planning system can't legislate for harmony. Planning is about land use. But in the last 10 years, the government has said, well, actually, planning should be about design. Because if your urban design being not just about aesthetics, but about how places work and how the built form of them works. And if you accept that the built form of places, the physical form of them, affects our experience of them, then surely that's what planning's about. And now Planning Policy Statement 1 says planning and urban design are indivisible. And that can't really be true, because otherwise, if planning otherwise, what's the point in having this seminar on urban design? But it means that they're two sides of the same coin. Planning is a wide thing. Urban design is really mainly about the physical form of the buildings. So we're saying, okay, but if we want to get to grips with the physical form, and if we don't just want to talk about aesthetics, what language do we use? And what language could a planning committee understand? And By Design, published in 2000, was the first government document that said, okay, let's set out how urban design fits into the planning system. And the authors of it thought, well, how do we do that? How do we talk about beauty and good design? And they said, well, actually, let's ask this question: what makes a successful place? Not what makes a beautiful place. We want beautiful places, but actually, let's think about what makes a successful place. Everybody, we all choose to go to one place rather than another, which makes places successful. And if we could think what it is that makes places successful rather than unsuccessful, maybe that's what we should base urban design in planning on. Well, thanks for that. I mean, that's the process that By Design went through, thinking, well, let's think of some successful places and think, do they have some features in common? And and By Design said really what you said is, and because it was an ODPM document, it put it in terms of urban design jargon. But actually what it was talking about was, it says, there are actually, 7 qualities that successful places tend to have. And they all, relate to, although the jargon words, they relate to things that people tend to recognize in a place. A distinct character, a clear distinction between public and private space, and so on. And I want to go quickly through them. Venice, you mentioned, a place with obviously a distinct character, but also a very attractive character, which is why people choose to go there. Anyone know where this is? Also Venice. But actually, the character is a really tricky one for planners. I mean, this is easy enough. The Royal Crescent in Bath, and if one of these houses collapsed, there probably wouldn't be much argument that it would be rebuilt in facsimile. We know what we're doing there. But if you're building a filling station in a medieval Cotswolds town, then it's a bit trickier. But at least someone has given serious thought to the question, how did they design filling stations in the 15th century? And if you're in a building in the lee of a Surrey gatehouse here in Transylvanian vernacular neo-Baroque style, and your job is to build a car wash, well, there you are. You can't say that planners don't try hard, but and the house builders. Well, this is the Hereford house type. So you can be sure it's characteristically Hereford in the same way that the Gloucester house type is characteristically Gloucester, and the Edinburgh house type is, it doesn't quite work. And actually, maybe what's really important about the character of a place is how a housing development, how it fits in to the street pattern of the surrounding area, of the topography. Maybe it's less important as to how the actual houses are designed. What's going to last is going to be the street pattern. That might be there for 100 years. And does this connect in any way to the existing area? Does it have any character? It's a sort of place where people say, if you fell out of an aeroplane and you landed there, you'd wonder where you were. Well, because you wouldn't, because you'd be dead. But that's the point. What makes a successful place? I said by design, continuity and enclosure. This is a bit of very disconnected American suburb, and an idea of how, by the new urbanists, how by using the principles of continuity and enclosure, of trying to make continuous building lines along the street and an enclosed space by buildings or by planting, and just using exactly the same form of building, but the same number of buildings, the same uses, but just putting them in a different place on the site. You may be able to create a more pleasant pedestrian environment, and the sort of place where you'll walk from one shop to the other rather than taking the car, which is what usually happens. And sometimes it's just how public and private space meet, and how when the boundary is broken down, something of that definition and the character of the street is lost. This is Poundbury again. These are detached suburban houses, but they've tried to give something of a sense of not just a modern suburb, by bringing the houses up to the edge of the street and creating a continuous street line with walls in front of the gardens. Glasgow, Crown Street, again, new development, but trying to, looking at the city and saying it's a city of with the strong tenement forms, very strong street lines, fairly dense. Let's try with this new housing to not just to say it's let's have lots of a suburban form, but let's try and create something that feels like real streets. Convivial public realm, said by design, is what we want, and here's the public being convivial. Although, as the Australian urban designer warns us, it takes 100 Australians to create the same urban activity as 10 Italians, and how many Londoners we can only guess. But it's not just the buildings that are creating the life. It's the wider planning as well, of course. Here's the anyone recognise this? The Bullring in Birmingham, a great, iconic, successful building. Successful in that people know where it is. It appears on the postcards. But there's lots happening in there. But it's all inward to the building, and certainly on this side, it does absolutely nothing at all for the street. And if you're walking along the street, all you've got to look at is your own reflection staring back at you. We're very good at creating development that turns its back on the street, that does nothing at all for the public realm. And this is inner city Liverpool, so the street's dangerous, so the developers put up a wall to protect the houses from the street. But of course, for these two women walking along the street, it probably feels less safe than it would if it was overlooked by windows. And if the inhabitants of the houses are being hacked to death by a serial killer with a machete, they're not going to use their mobile phone to call for help. Someone was paid a fee for designing this, and this nice work if you can get it. This is Lisbon in Portugal. What's happening in the houses affects the character of the street and how safe people feel, particularly if there's a dog ready to come to your rescue. Well, other things less positive perhaps. And planners are signed up to this, so they always say if you're building a wall in a supermarket, put windows in it to make the contact between the interior of the building and the street to bring it to life. But what they don't say is don't fill the windows with giant-sized pictures of vegetables, which is what they always do. This is a particularly obscene example from around the corner from me. Ease of movement we heard about from Milton Keynes, another of by designs. What makes a successful place? Ease of movement by car, but also there's a hierarchy of movement, and we need to think who are we making, who are we helping to get around? Whenever we build or design or plan anything, we're making movement easier for some people, less easy for other people. Permeability, urban designers talk about how porous an area is, how many routes there are through it. And permeability isn't necessarily a good thing or a bad thing in the abstract. It depends on the place. But often if we're creating really big blocks without a choice of routes through them, we're making a place that is pretty unappealing to a pedestrian, unlike the traditional historic towns that you were talking about, where there are little alleys and streets, and you feel that it's been designed to the scale of a pedestrian. Poundbury again, there's nothing actually on the street to tell you how to use it, whether it's for cars or for pedestrians, whether you stop at the end, whether you should go fast, turn right or turn left, because actually the street itself limits who can use it and how it can be used. And round the corner, there's these women standing in the middle of the road talking, and they're hard of hearing. They won't hear the traffic coming, but they're confident that actually the traffic won't be moving fast enough to run them down. And they haven't actually worked this out in their heads. They've thought about it, but as you say, it's an instinct. They know that's a comfortable place to stand. They can feel that they're safe there. Maid Marian Way in Nottingham a couple of years ago, the familiar segregation between cars and traffic. 2 years later, the same activities happening, the same traffic movement, the same pedestrian movement, but actually happening at the same level. A little bit of a city reclaimed and working much more happily. The Netherlands, where they do things slightly differently, if you're interested in traffic calming, forget about bollards and speed tables and sleeping policemen. Use a toddler there. They're highly effective and disposable. And here's Freiburg, same principle. Here the toddlers have actually died out for some reason. But this isn't a place where you would drive along at 30 miles an hour. You don't need a sign saying don't go drive at 30 miles an hour. Legibility, more urban design jargon from by design, but it's about places that feel welcoming to strangers and that are understandable, the sort of places where we can find our way around. Yes. and sometimes it's about landmarks, but actually it's also about just creating places that show their logic. You know, when the sign has to be that big, it really shows that the place itself is telling you practically nothing about what it is, how you use it, how you get there. That signage, in a way, is a sign that of you know that the place itself isn't telling you much. Adaptability. What makes a successful place? There's nothing so hard to predict as the future. But the one thing we know about any place is that it's going to change. We know very little about how we're going to live and work and shop in 10, 20, 30 years' time. So if we're designing things very specifically geared to the conditions of today, and if they're not going to be able to change, we could be setting up problems for ourselves. Here's Mr. and Mrs. Smug and their 2 children, happy in their executive cul-de-sac. But maybe it's a form of development that is pretty unadaptable, which doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it as such. But if we're building whole areas of our towns and cities that are unadaptable, that are geared to a particular way of life, then the process of change, which is inevitable, can be difficult. These buildings could be houses, shops, offices, and they don't all have to change together, and they probably do change, partly because of the form of the building, but also because they're on a connected street. So the flexibility is built in. But if you build big, inflexible things, if they fail, and things always do fail when economic, social conditions change, then failure happens on a big scale and can be very painful. Diversity, we heard about over here. Different things happening at different times. In traditional successful towns, we think of a whole mix of uses. Different people are there for doing different things. It's not just a shopping area, it's not just a business area, which means that when the shops close, there's still things going on. But it's so easy to develop things as business parks, retail parks, housing estates, which may work successfully for that specific function, but we're not actually creating anything that is traditionally a successful town with a public realm that you would choose to go to. And this is Urban Splash in Manchester saying, we're not just building housing, this is from one of their brochures, inviting you to buy their apartments, but they're saying what we're trying to create is a neighbourhood. And they illustrate this by saying that everything you see in the fridge can be bought in this neighbourhood. And you can tell it's Manchester because it's the only city in Britain where people keep their underpants in the fridge. Important to keep them cool. And that's the 7 qualities that by design identified as making successful places. And if those are the qualities that we want to get at, and they are fairly basic things about how we experience the places where we live and work, then maybe they can actually be put into the planning system in the form of planning and design policies, planning and design guidance. They can actually be criteria against which we will measure planning applications. And that's what Dan is going to talk about in the next half. And for that, now, that's all for me, and we're going to break for coffee, I think. Thanks very much. Thank you. We're going to go somewhere sunny, so that even if it's not warm in here, we can fool ourselves that it's warm. Anyone know Poole in Dorset? Attractive seaside town where the sun's always shining. And here it is. This is Poole Harbour, very attractive place where people go yachting. This is Branksome Island, I think, where the Boy Scout movement was founded. Here's a wonderful sandy beach. This is a very expensive housing area where footballers and their wives hang out, apparently. And here is the historic town of Poole, and here's more of Poole Harbour sailing area. And I want to take us to a site here on the edge of the town centre of Poole. And this is the site. This site here, which is in this picture, which is out of date, a sort of industrial site which is about to be cleared. Here's the waterfront where the boating happens. This site is owned by the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, and this is the Royal National Lifeboat Institution headquarters, and they have a training centre and a depot here. Here's Poole Station on the railway line. Here's a 1970s shopping centre, and here's the historic High Street leading down to the waterfront, which is down here. And here's the historic part of the town here. And I'm interested in this site. Here it is again. There's this 1980s shopping centre. There's the station. There's the High Street leading down to the harbour front there. Here's the historic centre, and there's our site on the edge of the historic town centre. There it is again. There's the lifeboat institution, and this is before it's cleared. There it is again. This diagram calls it the business gateway to the old town. Here's the 70s shopping centre, familiar sort of stuff. Here's the Royal National Lifeboat Institute. So our site is across the road from the RNLI. So this is the street that our site is sitting on, and not very busy, but it leads down to the town centre. Here's the chief executive of the lifeboat, and here's his boat yard. So our site is, we're standing in our site looking over the water, lovely sailing area. Here's the site, just to remind you. So what's the potential for this site? Well, this is the plan that we've come up with, my friend Dan and I. And, well, what can it doesn't need a lot of explaining. Our design statement can be fairly simple. A big box and some parking. We're happy with this sort of thing. And a loading bay, so we can do some loading. Here's the 70s shopping centre. Here's the station. Here's the harbour, the RNLI depot. This is the other way up from the aerial photograph you saw. Here's the RNLI headquarters with the man looking out over it. We'd like planning permission. And we've read your planning policy, and you've confirmed to us that you're quite happy to have a superstore there and the necessary parking with us. So there's no argument about that. But we understand. We know you've read by design, and that you know the qualities that the ODPM says that the planning should be trying to achieve. So we're aware that you may want to negotiate with us and to say you'd like our development to meet some of those by design criteria, and we're happy to negotiate, to compromise within reason. So what we'd like you to do is, in about 10 minutes' time, in your role as the planning department and planning committee of Poole District Council, to tell us what you want us to do with this site that will satisfy our need for a superstore and parking, and satisfy your whatever concerns you have about it. But time is money in this business, so you've got 10 minutes, and we're not waiting any longer than that. And we'll ask at the end. We're going to give you a plan, which you don't have to draw on, but you can if you want. But at the end of 10 minutes, we'll ask one person from each table to either show us your plan or use the pointer to point at the plan and tell us what you'd like us to do on the site in view of those. Remember those seven aspects of urban design, and the eighth one that we had in the draft of by design, but the ADPM cut out because in those days they weren't signed up to sustainability. So the resources as well. So if you're interested in that, we're not personally, because we think the planet can sort itself out. But if you're worried about that, then go ahead. So we'll give you the plans, and you've got about 10 minutes. So talk among yourselves in your tables and nominate a spokesperson. We hope that you will feel this design is takes the spirit of what you've been saying, and is something you'll be happy to give planning permission for. So I'm just waiting for the drawings to come through. So here you are. This is what you have designed, I think, or this is what we designed in response to your brief. We brought, as you asked, the big box down to the front of the site. We've lined it with small shop units along the front to give life to the street. We've put affordable housing above those small shop units, again to give life to the street when the shops are closed, and to use that site and give a sense of enclosure to the street. As Dan said, we looked at the underground car parking, and that wasn't feasible. But what we've done is made an additional parking deck here over part of the site, which frees up a lot of the rest of the site. So we're happy with this amount of car parking if we can have this much in the deck. So we're offering you another development of a hotel or possibly office building on this part of the site to give you the mixed use you wanted, and in this part as well, with a route through the site giving you the views out towards the waterfront. We've improved the connection from the station with a walkway along the side of the waterfront park that you asked for, and we're suggesting some waterfront housing here, taking advantage of the views, but not blocking the access to the site from the rest of the town. It stops here at the moment, but it may be that in future it could be adapted so that it could be continued around, depending on what you can negotiate with the lifeboat people. I think there's another drawing just coming through. Here we have a drawing of the site from the street again. Here's the lifeboat headquarters on the right. Here's the small shop units down at the front. Here are the affordable housing above it. Here's the hotel or office building, providing a landmark, a gherkin, if that's what you want. It could be. We can adapt to a gherkin with the click of a mouse. But this is a sort of a nautical reference. It's a mast, so that looks pretty nautical to me. to make the scheme adaptable, as you asked for, we've actually put the supermarket box here in a separate structure, so you can see here where the structures begin and end. So if in future either the supermarket needs to be redeveloped or the housing and shop units needs to be redeveloped, we don't have to redevelop and blight the whole site. So it can be done gradually. And so I hope you're reasonably happy with that solution. Working quickly and well, while we've been talking, we've actually built the thing. And on our webcam we can take you to, here it is, much like the drawing. There's the supermarket box, here's the affordable housing, here's your landmark, so as people from the town can see that there's something happening on the site. It's not just the end of a site, we're integrating it into the street. And here's the small shop units. Any initial comments on what we've produced for you? But what about those small shop units? They're not there. You're right, they're not there. If you look at in the planning register, you'll see that the planning permission was for small shop units on this site along the frontage. But actually, as you notice, they're not there, and they've been replaced by display windows. And a pretty, they don't actually expect anyone to look at this display. They're not trying very hard. And the entrance in the planning permission, the entrance to the supermarket was from the street, which is why there would have been people coming and going. But actually, there isn't an entrance all along this facade. There's no way in. The entrance is round the back from the car park, which is where it should be. So people can come by car. This is how you shop these days. And of course, there you have the frontage, where you can have the interaction between the car park and the bustling interior of the shop through those big windows. So, that gives a sense of life to the public realm and interest. Well, it would have done, but we decided to frost them as well. Just there's something we don't like about people seeing into or out of our shop. It makes us a bit happier if we can prevent that. So we've managed to do that. So this is the side from the car park. This is the public view of the shopping centre. But this is the walkway along the river. The planting is just starting. A pleasant place, pleasant view, and you could come shopping by boat. Really, talk about sustainable. Well, we're bending over backwards, as long as you don't miss your footing, of course. But that's up to you. This is the housing along the quayside. Contemporary 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. Contemporary meaning that they're being built now. Well, as you can see, I think that's what contemporary means. A fresh approach to apartment living in Poole, down by the water. And here's the deck. There's parking below here, and this is the upper deck. And here's the entrance to the car park. And here's where the average person in Poole parks, as far away from the entrance as possible. And I think it was interesting how a lot of you were coming up with things outside the site. Just looking at the connections between the site and the rest of the town, and looking at the RNLI site, and thinking about actually lifeboats are incredibly interesting things. I mean, lots of people find them interesting. There's interesting activity there. The idea of a museum or trying to create a link. There isn't at the moment. There isn't a link through the lifeboat site, but maybe there could be. But once you start thinking of the other possibilities of how it's relating to Poole as a whole, it's not just a site on the edge of the town. It's a site connecting different parts of the town. It's a site connecting the town to the waterfront. It's got fantastic opportunity, and the planners, made an enormous progress from the original plan to the planning permission. But you need to think that you've got to try and create something adaptable. Anything can happen, but the most thing we can do is to try and create something that will have some lasting value, and that when it comes to be adapted will actually add something to the town rather than just sterilising it.